Chapter 19 of The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 19 The Russian's Hand. The boy lay on his back on the sofa, a small figure that was, except for its breathing, altogether corpse-like to the eye. Joel Cairo sat beside the boy, bending over him, rubbing his cheeks and wrists, smoothing his hair back from his forehead, whispering to him and peering anxiously down at his white, still face. Bridget O'Shaughnessy stood in an angle made by table and wall. One of her hands was flat on the table, the other to her breast. She pinched her lower lip between her teeth and glanced furtively at Spade whenever he was not looking at her. When he looked at her, she looked at Cairo and the boy. Gutman's face had lost its troubled cast and was becoming rosy again. He put his hands in his trouser pockets. He stood facing Spade, watching him without curiosity. Spade, idly jingling his handful of pistols, nodded at Cairo's rounded back and asked Gutman, "It'll be all right with him?" "I don't know," the fat man replied. "That part of it will have to be strictly up to you, sir." Spade's smile made his V-shaped chin more salient. He said, "Cairo." The Levantine screwed his dark, anxious face around over his shoulder. Spade said, "Let him rest a while. We're going to give him to the police. We ought to get the details fixed before he comes to." Cairo asked bitterly, "Don't you think you have done enough to him without that?" Spade said, "No." Cairo left the sofa and went close to the fat man. "Please don't do this thing, Mr. Gutman," he begged. "You must realize that—" Spade interrupted him. "That's settled. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Coming in or getting out?" Though Gutman's smile was a little sad, even wistful in its way, he nodded his head. "I don't like it either," he told the Levantine, "but we can't help ourselves now. We really can't." Spade asked, "What are you doing, Cairo? In or out?" Cairo wet his lips and turned slowly to face Spade. "Suppose," he said, and swallowed. Can I choose?" "You can," Spade assured him seriously. "But you ought to know that if your answer is out, we'll give you to the police with your boyfriend." "Oh, I say, Mr. Spade," Gutman protested. "That isn't—" "Like hell we'll let him walk out on us," Spade said. "He'll either come in or he'll go in. We can't have any loose ends hanging around." He scowled at Gutman and exclaimed irritably, "Is this the first thing you guys ever stole? You're a fine lot of lollipops. What are you going to do next? Get down and pray?" He directed his scowl at Cairo. "Well, what's the answer?" "You give me no choice." Cairo's narrow shoulders moved in a hopeless shrug. "I come in." "Good." Spade looked at Gutman and at Bridget O'Shaughnessy. "Sit down." The girl sat down gingerly on the end of the sofa by the unconscious boy's feet. Gutman returned to the padded rocking chair and Cairo to the armchair. Spade put his handful of pistols on the table and sat on the table corner beside them. He looked at the watch on his wrist and said, 2:00. I can't get the Falcon till daylight. We've got plenty of time to arrange things." Gutman cleared his throat. "Where is it?" he asked, and then hastily explained, "I don't really care, sir. What I had in mind was that it would be best for all concerned if we did not get out of each other's sight now until our business had been transacted." He looked at the sofa and at Spade again, sharply. "You have the envelope?" Spade shook his head, looking at the sofa and then at the girl. He smiled with his eyes and said, "Miss O'Shaughnessy has it." "Yes, I have it," she murmured, putting a hand inside her coat. "I picked it up." "That's all right," Spade told her. "Hang on to it." He addressed Gutman. "We won't have to lose sight of each other. I can have the Falcon brought here." "An excellent idea," Gutman purred. "Then, sir, in exchange for the $10,000 and Wilmer, you will give us the Falcon and an hour or two of grace, so we won't be in the city when you turn him over to the authorities." "You don't have to duck," Spade said. "It'll be airtight." "That may be, sir, but nevertheless, we'll feel a lot safer well out of the city when Wilmer's being questioned by your district attorney." "Suit yourself," Spade replied. "I can hold him here all day if you want." He began to roll a cigarette. "Let's get the details fixed. Why did he shoot Thursby? And why and how and where did he shoot Jacoby?" Gutman smiled indulgently, shaking his head and purring. "Now, come, sir, you can't expect that. We've given you the money and Wilmer. That is our part of the agreement." "I do expect it," Spade said. He held his lighter to his cigarette. "A fall guy is what I asked for, and he's not a fall guy unless he's a cinch to take the fall. Well, to cinch that, I've got to know what's what." He pulled his brows together. "What are you squawking about? You're not going to be sitting so damn pretty if you leave him with an out." Gutman leaned forward and wagged a fat finger at the pistols on the table beside Spade's legs. "There's ample evidence of his guilt, sir. Both men were shot with those guns. It's a very simple matter for the police department experts to determine that the bullets that killed the men were fired from those guns. You know that. You've mentioned it yourself. And that, it seems to me, is ample proof of his guilt." "Maybe," Spade agreed, "but the thing's more complicated than that, and I've got to know what happened so I can be sure that the parts that won't fit in are covered up." Cairo's eyes were round and hot. "Apparently you've forgotten that you assured us it would be a very simple affair, Mr. Spade," he said. He turned his excited dark face to Gutman. "You see, I advised you not to do this. I don't think—" "It doesn't make a damn bit of difference what either of you think," Spade said bluntly. "It's too late for that now, and you're in too deep. Why did he kill Thursby?" Gutman interlaced his fingers over his belly and rocked his chair. His voice, like his smile, was frankly rueful. "You're an uncommonly difficult person to get the best of," he said. "I begin to think that we made a mistake, sir, in not letting you alone from the very first. By gad, I do." Spade moved his cigarette carelessly. "You haven't done so bad. You're staying out of jail, and you're getting the Falcon. What do you mean?" He put his cigarette into a corner of his mouth and said around it, "Anyhow, you know where you stand now. Why did he kill Thursby?" Gutman stopped rocking his chair. "Thursby was a notorious gunman, and Miss O'Shaughnessy's ally. We knew that removing him in just that manner would make her stop and think that perhaps she would do better to patch up her differences with us, besides leaving her without so violent a protector. You see, sir, I am being candid with you." "Yes, keep it up. You didn't think he might have the Falcon?" Gutman shook his head so that his round cheeks wobbled. "We didn't think that for a minute," he replied. He smiled benevolently. "We had the advantage of knowing Miss O'Shaughnessy far too well for that, and while we didn't then know that she had left the Falcon with Captain Jacoby in Hong Kong to be brought over on the Paloma while they took a faster boat, still we didn't think for a minute that, if only one of them knew where it was, Thursby was the one." Spade nodded thoughtfully and asked, "You didn't try to make a deal with him before you gave him the works?" "Yes, sir, certainly we did. I talked to him myself that night. Wilmer had located him 2 days before, and had been trying to follow him to wherever he was meeting Miss O'Shaughnessy, but Thursby was too crafty for that, even if he didn't know he was being followed. So that night Wilmer went to his hotel, learned he wasn't in, and waited outside for him. I suppose Thursby returned immediately after killing your partner. Be that as it may, Wilmer brought him in to see me. We could do nothing with him. He was quite determinedly loyal to Miss O'Shaughnessy. Well, sir, Wilmer followed him back to his hotel and did what he did." Spade thought for a moment. "That sounds all right. Now, Jacoby." Gutman looked with grave eyes at Spade and said, "Captain Jacoby's death was entirely Miss O'Shaughnessy's fault." The girl gasped, "Oh," and put a hand to her mouth. Spade's voice was heavy and even. "Never mind that now. How did it happen?" After a shrewd look at Spade, Gutman smiled. "Just as you say, sir," he said. "Well, Cairo, as you now know, got in touch with me, or rather I sent for him, after he left police headquarters the morning he was up here. We recognized the mutual advantage of pooling forces at that time." He directed his smile at the Levantine. "Mr. Cairo is a man of nice judgment. The Paloma was his thought. He saw the notice of its arrival in the papers, and remembered that in Hong Kong he had heard that Miss O'Shaughnessy and Jacoby had been seen together. That was when he was trying to find her there, and he thought at first that she had left on the Paloma, though later he learned that she hadn't. Well, sir, when he saw that in the paper, he guessed just what had happened. She had given the bird to Jacoby to bring here for her. Jacoby did not know what it was, of course. Miss O'Shaughnessy is too discreet for that." He beamed at the girl, rocked his chair twice, and went on. "Mr. Cairo and Wilmer and I went to call on Captain Jacoby, and were fortunate enough to arrive before Miss O'Shaughnessy had left. In many ways it was a difficult interview, but finally, by midnight, we had persuaded Miss O'Shaughnessy to come to terms, or so we thought. We then left the boat and set out for my hotel, where we were to pay Miss O'Shaughnessy and receive the bird. Well, sir, we mere men should have known better than to suppose we were capable of coping with her. En route, she and Captain Jacoby and the Falcon slipped completely through our fingers." He laughed merrily. "By gad, sir, it was neatly done." Spade looked at the girl. Her eyes, large and dark with pleading, met his. He asked Gutman, "You touched off the boat before you left?" "Not intentionally, no, sir," the fat man replied, "though I dare say we, or Wilmer at least, were responsible for the fire. He was out trying to find the Falcon while the rest of us were talking in the cabin, and he may have been careless with matches." "That's fine," Spade said. "If any slip-up makes it necessary for us to try him for Jacoby's murder, we can also hang an arson charge on him." "All right. Now, about the shooting." "Well, sir, we dashed all around town all day trying to find them, and we found them late this afternoon. We weren't sure at first that we had found them. All we were sure of was that we had found Miss O'Shaughnessy's apartment on California Street. But when we listened at the door, we heard them moving inside, so we were pretty confident we had them, and rang the bell. When she asked us who we were and we told her, we heard a window going up. We knew what that meant, of course, so Wilmer hurried downstairs as fast as he could and around to the back of the building to cover the fire escape. And when he turned into the alley, he ran right plumb smack into Jacoby running away with the Falcon under his arm. That was a difficult situation to handle, but Wilmer did every bit as well as he could. He shot Jacoby more than once, but Jacoby was too tough either to fall down or drop the Falcon, and he was too close for Wilmer to keep out of his way. He knocked Wilmer down and ran. And this was in broad daylight, you understand, in the afternoon. And when Wilmer got up, he could see a policeman coming up from the block below. So he had to give it up. He dodged into the open back of the building next to the Coronet, into the street, and then in to join us, and very fortunate he was to make it safely. Well, sir, there we were, stumped again. Miss O'Shaughnessy had opened the door for Cairo and me after she had seen Jacoby safely out the window, and he smiled at a memory, we persuaded, that is the word, sir, her to tell us that she had told Jacoby to take the Falcon to you. It looked very unlikely that he'd live to get there, even if he wasn't picked up by the police on his way, but that was the only chance we had, sir. And so, once more, we persuaded Miss O'Shaughnessy to give us a little assistance. We had her phone you in an attempt to draw you away from your office before Jacoby got there, and we sent Wilmer after him. Unfortunately, it had taken us too long to decide, and too long to persuade Miss O'Shaughnessy to—" The boy on the sofa groaned and rolled over on his side. His eyes opened and closed several times. The girl stood up and moved into the angle of table and wall again. "To cooperate with us," Gutman concluded hurriedly. "And so you had the Falcon before we could reach you." The boy put one foot down on the floor, raised himself on an elbow, opened his eyes wide, put the other foot down, sat up, and looked around. When his eyes focused on Spade, bewilderment went out of them. Cairo left the armchair and went over to the boy. He put his arm on the boy's shoulder and started to say something. The boy rose to his feet quickly, shaking the arm off his shoulder. He glanced around the room once and then fixed his eyes on Spade again. His face was set hard, and he held his body so tense that it seemed drawn in and shrunken. Spade, sitting on a corner of the table, swinging his legs carelessly, said, "Now listen, kid. If you come over here and start cutting up, I'm going to kick you in the face. Sit down and shut up and behave, and you'll last longer." The boy looked at Gutman. Gutman smiled benignly at him and said, "Well, Wilmer, I'm sorry to lose you indeed, and I want you to know that I couldn't be any fonder of you if you were my own son. But, well, by gad, if you lose a son, it's possible to get another, and there's only one Maltese Falcon." Spade laughed. Cairo leaned over and muttered in the boy's ear. The boy, keeping his cold hazel eyes on Gutman's face, sat down on the sofa again. The Levantine sat beside him. Gutman's sigh did not affect the benignity of his smile. He said to Spade, "When you're young, you simply don't understand things." Cairo had an arm around the boy's shoulder again and was whispering to him. Spade grinned at Gutman and addressed Bridget O'Shaughnessy. "I think it'd be swell if you'd see what you can find us to eat in the kitchen, with plenty of coffee. Will you? I don't like to leave my guests." "Surely," she said, and started toward the door. Gutman stopped rocking. "Just a moment, my dear." He held up a thick hand. "Hadn't you better leave the envelope in here? You don't want to get grease spots on it." The girl's eyes questioned Spade, who said in an indifferent tone, "It's still his." She put a hand inside her coat, took out the envelope, and gave it to Spade. Spade tossed it into Gutman's lap, saying, "Sit on it if you're afraid of losing it." "You misunderstand me," Gutman replied suavely. "It's not that at all, but business should be transacted in a business-like manner." He opened the flap of the envelope, took out the $1,000 bills, counted them, and chuckled so that his belly bounced. "For instance, there are only 9 bills here now." He spread them out on his fat knees and thighs. "There were 10 when I handed it to you, as you well know." His smile was broad and jovial and triumphant. Spade, looking at Bridget O'Shaughnessy, asked, "Well?" She shook her head sidewise with emphasis. She did not say anything, though her lips moved slightly, as if she had tried to. Her face was frightened. Spade held his hand out to Gutman, and the fat man put the money into it. Spade counted the money, $9,000 bills, and returned it to Gutman. Then Spade stood up, and his face was dull and placid. He picked up the 3 pistols on the table. He spoke in a matter-of-fact voice. "I want to know about this. We," he nodded slightly to indicate the girl, "are going in the bathroom. The door will be open, and I'll be facing it. Unless you want a 3-story drop from the windows, there's no way out of the room except past the bathroom door. Don't try to make it." "Really, sir," Gutman protested, "it's not necessary, and certainly not very polite of you to threaten us in this manner. You must know that we've not the least desire to leave." "I'll know when I'm through." Spade was patient but resolute. "This trick upsets things. I've got to find the answer. It won't take long." He touched the girl's elbow. "Come on." In the bathroom, Bridget O'Shaughnessy found words. She put her hands up flat on Spade's chest and her face up close to his and whispered, "I did not take that bill, Sam." "I don't think you did," Spade said, "but I've got to know. Take your clothes off." "You won't take my word for it?" "No. Take your clothes off." "I won't." "All right. We'll go back to the other room, and I'll have them taken off." She stepped back with her hands to her mouth. Her eyes were round with horror. "You would?" she asked through her fingers. "I will," he said. "I've got to know what happened to that bill, and I'm not going to be held up by anybody's maidenly modesty." "Oh, it isn't that." She came close to him and put her hands on his chest again. "Can't you see that if you make me, you'll be killing something?" He did not raise his voice. "I don't know anything about that. I've got to know what happened to the bill. Take them off." She looked at his unblinking yellow-gray eyes, and her face became pink and then white again. "Very well," she said. He sat on the side of the bathtub, watching the open door. No sound came from the living room. She removed her clothes swiftly. In her mien was pride without defiance or embarrassment. He picked up each piece and examined it with fingers as well as with eyes. He did not find the $1,000 bill. When he had finished, he stood up, holding her clothes out in his hands to her. "Thanks," he said. "Now I know." She took the clothing from him. She did not say anything. He picked up his pistols. He shut the bathroom door behind him and went into the living room. Gutman smiled amiably from the rocking chair. "Find it?" he asked. Cairo, sitting beside the boy on the sofa, looked at Spade with questioning, opaque eyes. The boy did not look up. He was leaning forward, head between hands, elbows on knees, staring at the floor between his feet. Spade told Gutman, "No, I didn't find it. You palmed it." The fat man chuckled. "I palmed it?" "Yes," Spade said, jingling the pistols in his hand. "Do you want to say so, or do you want to stand for a frisk?" "Stand for—" "You're going to admit it," Spade said, "or I'm going to search you. There's no third way." Gutman looked up at Spade's hard face and laughed outright. "By gad, sir, I believe you would. I really do. You're a character, sir, if you don't mind my saying so." "You palmed it," Spade said. "Yes, sir, that I did." The fat man took a crumpled bill from his vest pocket, smoothed it on a wide thigh, took the envelope holding the 9 bills from his coat pocket, and put the smooth bill in with the others. "I must have my little joke every now and then, and I was curious to know what you do in a situation of that sort. I must say you passed the test with flying colors, sir. It never occurred to me that you'd hit on such a simple and direct way of getting at the truth." Spade sneered at him without bitterness. "That's the kind of thing I'd expect from somebody the punk's age." Gutman chuckled. Bridget O'Shaughnessy, dressed again except for coat and hat, came out of the bathroom, took a step toward the living room, turned around, went back to the kitchen, and turned on the light. Cairo edged closer to the boy on the sofa and began whispering in his ear again. The boy shrugged irritably. Spade, looking at the pistols in his hand and then at Gutman, went out into the passageway to the closet there. He opened the door, put the pistols inside on the top of a trunk, shut the door, locked it, put the key in his pants pocket, and went to the kitchen door. Bridget O'Shaughnessy was filling an aluminum percolator. "Find everything?" Spade asked. "Yes," she replied in a cool voice, not raising her head. Then she set the percolator aside and came to the door. She blushed, and her eyes were large and moist and chiding. "You shouldn't have done that, Sam," she said softly. "I had to find out, Angel." He bent down, kissed her mouth lightly, and returned to the living room. Gutman smiled at Spade and offered him the white envelope, saying, "This will soon be yours. You might as well take it now." Spade did not take it. He sat in the armchair and said, "There's plenty of time for that. Besides, we haven't done enough talking about the money end yet. I ought to have more than 10,000. Gutman said, "$10,000 is a lot of money." Spade said, "You're quoting me, but it's not all the money in the world." "No, sir, it's not. I grant you that. But it's a lot of money to be picked up in as few days and as easily as you're getting it." "You think it's been so damned easy?" Spade asked and shrugged. "Well, maybe, but that's my business." "It certainly is," the fat man agreed. He screwed up his eyes, moved his head to indicate the kitchen, and lowered his voice. "Are you sharing with her?" Spade said, "That's my business, too." "It certainly is," the fat man agreed once more. "But—" he hesitated. "I'd like to give you a word of advice." "Go ahead." "If you don't, I dare say, you'll give her some money in any event, but if you don't give her as much as she thinks she ought to have, my word of advice is, be careful." Spade's eyes held a mocking light. He asked, "Bad?" "Bad," the fat man replied. Spade grinned and began to roll a cigarette. Cairo, still muttering in the boy's ear, had put his arm around his shoulders again. Suddenly the boy pushed his arm away and twisted around on the sofa to face Cairo. The boy's face held anger and disgust. He made a fist of a small hand and struck the Levantine's mouth with it. Cairo cried out as a woman might have cried and drew back to the very end of the sofa. He took a silk handkerchief from his pocket and put it to his mouth. It came away daubed with blood. He put it to his mouth again and looked reproachfully at the boy. The boy snarled, "Keep away from me," and put his face between his hands again. Cairo's handkerchief released the fragrance of chypre in the room. Cairo's cry had drawn Bridget O'Shaughnessy to the door. Spade, grinning, jerked a thumb at the sofa and told her, "The course of true love. How's the food coming along?" "It's coming," she said, and returned to the kitchen. Spade lighted his cigarette and addressed Gutman. "Let's talk about the money." "Willingly, sir, with all my heart," the fat man replied. "But I might as well tell you frankly right now that 10,000 is every cent I can raise." Spade exhaled the smoke. "I ought to have 20. "I wish you could. I'd give it to you gladly, if I had it, but 10,000 is every cent I can manage on my word of honor." "All right, then, call it 15,000. Gutman smiled and frowned and shook his head. "Mr. Spade, I've told you frankly and candidly and on my word of honor as a gentleman that $10,000 is all the money I've got, all I can raise." "Sure, you told me that, but you didn't say positively." Gutman laughed and said, "Positively." Spade said gloomily, "That's not any too good, but if it's the best you can do, give it to me." Gutman handed him the envelope. Spade counted the bills and was putting them in his pocket when Bridget O'Shaughnessy came in carrying a tray. The boy would not eat. Cairo took a cup of coffee. The girl, Gutman, and Spade ate the scrambled eggs and bacon and toast and marmalade she had prepared, and drank 2 cups of coffee apiece. Then they settled down to wait the rest of the night through. Gutman smoked a cigar and read Celebrated Criminal Cases of America, now and then chuckling over or commenting on the parts of its contents that he found interesting. Cairo nursed his bruised mouth and sulked on his end of the sofa. The boy sat with his head in his hands until a little after 4 o'clock. Then he lay down with his feet toward Cairo, turned his face to the window, and went to sleep. Bridget O'Shaughnessy, in the armchair, dozed, listened to the fat man's comments, and carried on a wide-spaced, desultory conversation with Spade. Spade lolled and smoked cigarettes and moved, without fidgeting or nervousness, around the room. He sat sometimes on an arm of the girl's chair, on the table corner, on the floor at her feet, on a straight-backed chair. He was wide-awake, cheerful, and full of vigor. At 5:30 he went into the kitchen and made more coffee. Half an hour later the boy stirred, awakened, and sat up yawning. Gutman looked at his watch and questioned Spade. "Can you get it now?" "Give me another hour." Gutman nodded and returned his attention to his book. At 7 o'clock Spade went to the telephone and called Effie Perrine's number. "Hello, Mrs. Perrine? This is Mr. Spade. Will you let me talk to Effie, please?" "Yes, it is." "Thanks." He whistled 2 lines of Ankuba softly. "Hello, Angel. Sorry to get you up." "Yes, very. Here's the plot. In our Holland box at the post office you'll find an envelope addressed in my scribble. There's a Pickwick Stage parcel room check in it, for the bundle we got yesterday. Will you get the bundle and bring it to me, PDQ? Yes, I'm home. That's the girl. Hustle. Bye. The street doorbell rang at 10 minutes of 8. Spade went to the telephone box and pressed the button that released the door. Gutman put down his book and rose, smiling. "You don't mind if I go to the door with you?" he asked. "Okay," Spade told him. Gutman followed him to the corridor door. Spade opened it. Presently, Effie Perrine, carrying the brown-wrapped parcel, came from the elevator. Her boyish face was gay and excited, and she came forward quickly, almost trotting. After one quick glance, she did not look at Gutman. She smiled at Spade and gave him the parcel. He took it, saying, "Thanks a lot, lady. I'm sorry to spoil your day of rest, but it's not the first one you've spoiled," she replied, laughing, and then, when it was apparent that he was not going to invite her in, asked, "Anything else?" He shook his head. "No, thanks." She said, "Bye-bye," and went back to the elevator. Spade shut the door and carried the parcel into the living room. Gutman's face was red and his cheeks quivered. Cairo and Bridget O'Shaughnessy came to the table as Spade put the parcel there. They were excited. The boy rose, pale and tense, but he remained by the sofa, staring under curling lashes at the others. Spade stepped back from the table, saying, "There you are." Gutman's fat fingers made short work of cord and paper and excelsior, and he had the black bird in his hands. "Ah," he said huskily, "now, after 17 years." His eyes were moist. Cairo licked his red lips and worked his hands together. The girl's lower lip was between her teeth. She and Cairo, like Gutman and like Spade and the boy, were breathing heavily. The air in the room was chilly and stale and heavy with tobacco smoke. Gutman set the bird down on the table again and fumbled at a pocket. "It's it," he said, "but we'll make sure." Sweat glistened on his round cheeks. His fingers jerked as he took out a gold pocket-knife and opened it. Cairo and the girl stood close beside him on either side. Spade stood back a little, where he could watch the boy as well as the group at the table. Gutman turned the bird upside down and scraped an edge of its base with his knife. Black enamel came off in tiny curls, exposing blackened metal beneath. Gutman's knife blade bit into the metal, turning back a thin curved shaving. The inside of the shaving and the narrow plane its removal had left had the soft gray sheen of lead. Gutman's breath hissed between his teeth. His face became turgid with hot blood. He twisted the bird around and hacked at its head. There, too, the edge of his knife bared lead. He let knife and bird bang down on the table while he wheeled to confront Spade. "It's a fake," he said hoarsely. Spade's face became somber. His nod was slow, but there was no slowness in his hand going out to catch Bridget O'Shaughnessy's wrist. He pulled her to him and grasped her chin with his other hand, raising her face roughly. "All right," he growled down into her frightened face. "You've had your little joke. Now tell us about it." She cried, "No, Sam, no. That's the one I got from Kamidov. I swear." Joel Cairo thrust himself between Spade and Gutman and began to emit words in a shrill, spluttering stream. "That's it! That's it! It was the Russian! I should have known! What a fool we thought him, and what fools he made of us!" Tears ran down the Levantine's cheeks, and he danced up and down. "You bungled it!" he screamed at Gutman. "You and your stupid attempt to buy it from him! You fat fool! You let him know it was valuable, and he found out how valuable and made a duplicate for us. No wonder we had so little trouble stealing it. No wonder he was so willing to send me off around the world looking for it. You imbecile! You bloated idiot!" He put his hands to his face and blubbered. Gutman's jaw sagged. He blinked vacant eyes. Then he shook himself and was, by the time his bulbs had stopped jouncing, again a jovially smiling fat man. "Come, sir," he said good-naturedly, There's no need of going on like that. Everybody errs at times, and you may be sure that this is every bit as severe a blow to me as to anyone else. Yes, that is the Russian's hand. There is no doubt of it. Well, sir, what do you suggest? Shall we stand here and call each other names? Or shall we—" He paused, and his smile was a cherub's. "Go to Constantinople." Now Cairo's jaws sagged, while Cairo's eyes bulged. In a little while he stammered, "You are—" Amazement that came with full comprehension seemed to rob him of further words. Gutman patted a fat cheek gently with a fat hand. His eyes twinkled. His voice was a complacent, throaty purring. "For 17 years I have wanted that little item, and have been trying to get it. If I must spend another year on the quest, well, sir, that will be an additional expenditure in time of only—" His lips moved silently as he calculated, 5 15/17%. The Levantine giggled and cried, "I go with you." Spade suddenly released the girl's wrist and looked around the room. The boy was not there. Spade went into the passageway. The corridor door was open. Spade made a dissatisfied mouth, shut the door, and returned to the living room. He leaned against the door frame and looked at Gutman. He looked at him for a long time, sourly. Then he spoke, mimicking the fat man's throaty purr. "Well, sir, I must say you're a swell lot of thieves." Gutman chuckled. "We've nothing to boast of, and that's a fact, sir," he said. "But, well, we're none of us dead yet, and there's not a bit of use of thinking the world's come to an end just because we've run into a little setback." He brought his left hand from behind him and held it out at Spade, pink, smooth, hilly palm up. "I'll have to ask you for that envelope, sir." Spade did not move. His face was wooden. He said, "I held up my end. You got your dingus. It's your hard luck, not mine, that it wasn't what you wanted." "Now come, sir," Gutman said persuasively. "We've all failed, and there's no reason for expecting any one of us to bear the brunt of it. It's simply one of those unfortunate happenings, and—" He brought his right hand from behind him. In the hand was a small pistol, an ornately engraved and inlaid affair of silver and gold and mother-of-pearl. "In short, sir, I must ask you to return my $10,000. Spade's face did not change. He shrugged phlegmatically and took the envelope from his pocket. He started to hold it out to Gutman, hesitated, opened the envelope, and took out $1,000 bill. He put that bill into his pants pocket. He tucked the envelope's flap in over the other bills and held them out to Gutman. "That'll take care of my time and expenses," he said. Gutman, after a little pause, imitated Spade's shrug and accepted the envelope. He said, "Now, sir, we will say good-bye to you, unless—" the fat puffs around his eyes crinkled. "You care to undertake the Constantinople expedition with us? You don't? Well, sir, frankly, I'd like to have you along. You're a man to my liking, a man of many resources and of nice judgment. Because we know you're a man of nice judgment, we know we can say good-bye with every assurance that you'll hold the details of our little enterprise in confidence. We know we can count on you appreciating the fact that, as the situation now stands, any legal difficulties that come to us in connection with these last few days would likewise and equally come to you and the charming Miss O'Shaughnessy. You're too shrewd not to realize that, sir, I'm sure." "I understand that," Spade replied. "I was sure you would. I'm also sure that, now there's no alternative, you'll somehow manage the police without giving them a fall guy." "I'll make out all right," Spade replied. "I was sure you would. Well, sir, the shortest farewells are the best. Adieu." He made a portly bow. "And to you, Miss O'Shaughnessy, adieu. I leave you the rara avis on the table as a little memento." End of chapter 19.